Okay. At any rate, thank you all so much for being here with us. I know we've got some folks on Zoom with us as well, and I think Amelia's about to, or John, to put it on. Hello. Put it on Facebook Live as well. So we're going to get ready to do some of our table discussions, and then I think John is going to take the Zoom to one of the tables to be able to engage and participate in the conversation. Want to remind folks that the survey, however folks feel about it, is available and can be shared widely. It is not only for a select few, and that these conversations are also open and people can reach out, and we'll continue to have those conversations. Wanted to invite Chief Scott up to say a few words, and wanted to just remind folks that we are engaging in these conversations to hear from diverse voices and diverse experiences to inform this process, and really am grateful that want to recognize the commissioners that are in the room: Commissioner Benedicto, Commissioner Carter Oberstone, Commissioner Deborah Walker. I got to get used to you on police, and it is an art form, though, I will say, to be on this commission. I just want to just recognize and thank them so much for their presence and for being here, and for both the commission and the department for being willing to have these conversations and to be in community and make space for that. So I will yield the floor to Chief Scott, and then if any of the commissioners wanted to say anything, and then we'll kind of move into the table discussion. So, Chief.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. So first of all, good evening, everybody, and thank you, and thanks for being here. I'm not going to repeat everything that Dr. Davis said, but I do want to thank the commissioners for being here. Commissioner Walker, Commissioner Carter Oberstone. He's here. Back in the room. Commissioner Benedicto, who, for those of you that haven't been involved in these types of discussions, the Police Commission is the oversight, civilian oversight, and the policy-making authority of the police department. And the reason that we're all here tonight is we want to hear from you about a very important policy that really goes in line with a number of things that I hope we get to all these discussions tonight. But fundamentally what this is about is we have had a high disproportionate amount of people of color that have been impacted by stops, arrests, and things like that. And this policy, part of what this discussion is about is how do we turn that around and make this better. The other part of the discussion is really to have a policy that's sound and allows the members of the San Francisco Police Department to do what they need to do in terms of traffic safety, but at the same time, if we're able to put in policy provisions that can help us reduce the disparities, that's really what the ideal goal is. So we got to do both. We have to protect public safety, make sure that at least as far as traffic is concerned, because this is a traffic policy, and also we want to address the disparities. And really the reason that we are all here is to hear from you. Oftentimes, many members of our very diverse communities, they don't, for many reasons, can't get to the police commission hearings. They can't come into the police station or go to community meetings or their local police station. And the commission did really what I think is a wonderful thing, and we're all behind it, is going out to the community to hear the voices of maybe people that we don't necessarily hear from oftentimes. We have a variety of folks either in the room or on Zoom here taking this meeting virtually, and we really do want to hear from you. We're not here to convince you of anything. We're not here to try to tell you who's right or who's wrong. We want to hear from you about a very important policy that affects us all. And that's really why we're here. So please, we're going to keep that spirit in mind. I think our San Francisco police officer members are spread out among the different tables. We don't want to, all be in one location because we want to interact and have these discussions with you all. So again, thank you for being here. This is a very important policy, and we really do want to hear your voices and hear what you have to say. Ultimately, the Police Commission will do what they do, and they will decide what the policy will be with everybody's input. I'm not saying that everybody's input is going to be accepted, because that's not guaranteed either, but your input will be valued, and some will be accepted, I'm sure, and your input is very important, and your feedback is very important. So thank you all, and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Davis.
Okay, thank you again, Chief. And so we are going to now move to the tables, but I don't know, Commissioner Benedicto or Commissioner Carter or Oberstone, if you wanted to have a few remarks. And I know Amelia was saying maybe online they're having a hard time hearing, or are they good? Better. Okay. So, and then we're going to get to it. But Commissioner Carter, Oberstone.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. I'll be really brief because I want to make sure we get to the heart of tonight, which is to hear from all of you who came out. Just want to give a big thank you to the Human Rights Commission and Dr. Davis for putting on not only this event, but the many, many events throughout the month of December that are designed to ensure that this policy reflects the concerns and the views and the goals of the people that it will impact most directly. I think Chief Scott said it well, that this policy is really about ensuring that police can still make the stops they need to make to promote public safety, and make fewer of the stops that are not a good use of department resources, because as Chief Scott said, they drive up racial disparities, and they tend to overwhelmingly be for low-level offenses that don't pose a direct risk to public safety. And they also, coincidentally, don't tend to turn up evidence of crimes at a very high rate. We're not finding a lot of guns and drugs in the course of these stops. And so these stops are creating a lot of harm in terms of the harm to the individual who's pulled over, often the innocent individual who's pulled over, and either perceives that they were pulled over on account of their race or, in fact, was pulled over on account of their race. I think that these stops create serious and grievous societal harms, and I think it's the Commission's obligation to remedy those harms, but again, doing it in a way that still permits police to carry out their core function, which is to keep us all safe. So with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Davis, and I really look forward to engaging with everyone who came out tonight.
All right. Well, I do also want to just recognize and thank Commissioner Hijazi from the Human Rights Commission for joining us this evening and for her support of this work. So with that, we will encourage you to begin the conversations at the table to inform, and what we've really identified and outlined that we want to see happen through this process is we're trying to gauge who had awareness that this process was happening and understanding around it, to also think about and get feedback on what is already being proposed to see if anything is missing or needs to be added. And then that is kind of the last point around this. What do we need to do to really make this effective and to address concerns that might be raised? And so again, on both sides, right? Whether it is folks who see this as a tool to be able to better make our communities safer, or folks who are really concerned about this actually doing more harm than good. We want to really have those conversations and come up with a strategy that helps our communities be better and for everyone to feel safe. So thank you all so much, and go ahead at your tables and start the discussion there.
outline essentially what's being proposed related to traffic stops and preventing traffic stops. So you want to just take a couple of minutes to read it, engage in that conversation.
See if this works, otherwise we'll just do it live.
The way the policy is drafted, like, if you don't have, let's just like project pull over. If you only have one out of two, you no longer the grounds for getting pulled over.
She is asking a question.
So potentially we can get on, maybe you can get mail or ticket. But like for all of these change, and then you can say these things only people using.
Okay. I'm on.
And it's the same thing too with something else. Like, for example, let's say you're pulled over for speeding or running a red light. If, since that's still completely a valid reason to get pulled over, if you're stopped for that and the officer then notices your registration is out or only have one plate, they can still issue a ticket. It doesn't change the law about license plates. It just says that, like she said, that as a way to reduce disparities in stops, we're not going to prioritize making stops for some of these lower level offenses.
But do you know if there's any question I can't answer here? This question will get added to our.
So how much can correctly for our young scholars at the table, this language is suggested, or this list rather, should not merit, or officers should not stop people or pull them over for following the rules. We want to understand, is this the right list, what's missing? If you're comfortable sharing your personal experiences, maybe where you may have had an experience being stopped by your law enforcement, or know someone who has been stopped by law enforcement, but mission as well as your department is trying to do to clarify what should not merit hopefully stop us. Does that make sense? Then we want to get your opinion based on this list, or even before we get there, yeah, well, what's missing? Is there anything missing from this list?
Is there anything on this list that you feel, because our goal was to pick things that the data shows don't have a high value. So that's showing how it is. Also the low public safety value. That's like, for example, if you look at broken taillights, we always think we do this. So we recognize it. So if there's something on those, you say, oh, actually that's good. You guys say, that makes sense. You there's something that should be added to the list. We did a listening session initially. Some people talked about checking their phones on red light versus being on their phones while they're driving. A couple people mentioned that sometimes they'll get a red light and they'll chat right away. So yeah, here's the things you have them jump on and add to the list. What should be the So all our students also have monthly stickers. And so under this policy, that was out of date. So if your sticker said May 2022 and it's now August, that also would not be September. That would also not be the basis for the same thing. Like I said before, the officer could still possibly mail it to get for that, but you wouldn't stop someone for their place. way incentivized. So you think it's a doable thing. So, exactly.
I'm not sure if any of y'all have tried it yet, but it would be the case some years ago. I've had personal experience where it would expire tags and have to pull over. Why was it pulled over? Your tags are expired. But it didn't run a red light, didn't create this is suggesting cause for injury or death. It was just the tags were expired, which could potentially open up Pandora's box for other things depending on who's in the car. Thankfully it didn't, but that would have been what the department was trying to undo is have officers pull people over because expired tags.
Has been challenged by humanity.
If they're not about to cause injury.
So there may be a benefit. Perhaps a certain officer needed to recognize the data shows that they have a racial bias.
Have you ever been
About this and provide officers what the commission doing. And then after you answer this question,
that's another thing, so jump in here. The first HRC thing, and the other HRC limits.
have you experienced a stop
Once it's already done,
that made you feel that more was happening than
believe that
traffic stop?
people ask questions.
I want to hear some of your experience.
And so, you know, for a lot of people we've heard, we feel, you know, we feel good to grow.
Is there enough happening? Are there more aspects to this new general order? This so general order will direct police officers how they behave on the street. I'm going to put some. Let the commissioner speak for a moment. I want to hear from you, and if I look at the staff links under the chapter, so you have access to the so I'm talking the new general order.
Yeah, so basically there's a section like right now, there are officers more or less ask pretty open questions. But now, this new requirement to have what's called a session, which is a standard set by the board before they ask. You know, right now they might ask really the question like, but if, for example, officer saw a box of ammo that passed by something along those lines. So it sort of limits the ability to ask questions. It's mostly for, no, it's less of a focus on this. Yeah, but it is part of the policy.
And also, Chief Scott.
Yeah, no, you all probably had seen that draft policy.
Want to be an attorney? Take a look.
So if this may be helpful, and the commission and I can kind of get into why we are having this discussion. You're learning to drive. You don't drive yet. You drive? So if you experience or anybody in your family ever experienced stop by and get asked a bunch of questions have nothing to do with the traffic.
Some I feel a lot of cash in the car.
Yeah, just you want to stop sign, I'm sure you get asked, so do you have to get
I want everybody to have the time to say what they're going to say, and please, out of respect for everybody's here for voices.
some of us limiting officers to be able to do that because you're stopping somebody for valid traffic reasons.
Thank you, sir.
One of the things that research has shown that drives when those stops and turn into something else. So stopping for a stop sign, now all of a sudden you're suspected for what you have some type of illegal weapon. Part of what the policy is the officers need to do unless they have an identifiable. But that's like let's say I get stopped, I'm driving and I get stopped for a stop sign. Officer comes up and then they see bullets on the floor. Then it's reason for officers to start asking questions about why the bullets on the floor. To believe, and this is what the research has shown, is that when it stops, these are known as, what I'm getting at here, pretext stops. So when the officer didn't stop without traffic code, because they want to search something. So that's what's known as a pretext stop. I stopped you because you did something. But this is just shots. The reason that we think that higher college lower the amount of disparities, some of the research has shown that they have some more economic. So one of the things that I think we all want is for officers to be able to get to the different public safety information and do it in a way that we don't make that problem first. So we just focus on stopping the traffic. That's like finding something else that gives me a legitimate reason to go in another direction. And I should just be focused on that. So that's what that's about. Any questions about that? Does it make sense to you?
And it's also not limited to driving.
Yeah, there's some bicycle
There's
walking.
like biking, walking, so has there ever been an incident? Oh.
It's not been passed yet. That's why we're doing all these conversations, because the commission is eventually going to vote on what the policy should be, and they want to hear from the community on what that policy should be. I hope so. I think it will. It's hard to say for sure, so we're doing these listening sessions through September, and then we're going to take it back to the commission in the fall. There are a lot of other steps that have to happen, including because these affect officers' labor rights through the negotiation with the Police Officers Association. So I can't say I would be passed by this date, but we're working to make sure that whatever we propose is the best policy possible.
So, and there's, anytime there's a policy, we want to try to hear all sides of the conversation. Of course, the commission is the government, they're going to make the decision. The police department gets to weigh in, the commission also. And so these discussions are so you all hear really what the policy is about and some of the why, but also hear all sides. Such as pretext stops. They're legal. And of course, they're legal, but you can make a policy that's more restrictive than what the law allows. Like say our use of force policy is more restrictive than what the law allows. So the commission has the ability to make a more restrictive policy that they think will help balance
Every comment without one of your people who are affected.
There's a lot to this, but I really want you to understand
Because it tells us where they're at.
you have an understanding.
I was very struck by your comment that you recognize.
And know that anything shared in this space will be held against y'all. This is the phrase that makes sense. It's like all the things that are going on around even myself, because I'm in the know. So I've driven, I've been pulled over, I've experienced all the things. But in terms of the feedback that we want to receive, like we really want community to be centered. So like y'all are here presently, but try to invite like family members or friends, experiences. So when you look at this list, you know someone who has ever been stopped for anything on this list. You can not have a license plate, registration check, jaywalking, riding a bike on a sidewalk. Have you all know people who've ever been pulled over for anything on this list? Or maybe pulled over for something that they probably shouldn't have been pulled over, but was not on this list, is not on this list?
You have other opportunities if you want to.
Not a quiz.
You probably go home and you might have a conversation with somebody and they'll say something like, that makes sense, but let us know. So this is not two doctors outside.
And also like what Dr. Shah said is, like by coming here to this, you now become like, you can become advocates and leaders in your community for these policies. If you have older siblings or older friends that you think they would have a viewpoint that's interesting, you could tell them to link to the survey. They can still fill out the survey and share their views. If they make surveys too like limiting, they can email the police commission, just write whatever they want. All those comments are being taken into. Like, we want to hear from as many voices, especially in the community as possible. Because especially when the commission writes policies, sometimes it's just like us and deputy chiefs and lawyers in a room, and we can lose track of what it really looks like to people in the community. That's what we do.
Y'all are all in high school, so.
Yeah, I got most of my tickets in high school. It's in those first couple of years that you tend to make those mistakes. So,
So, I mean, if not, if you haven't, I was looking at my questions too. Like, when you think about when people are stopped, do you think it's okay for police to ask other questions other than what they were stopped for? Like, for example, if somebody gets pulled over for brake lights, should police be able to ask, oh, well, is anybody on probation or parole right away? Do you think that's okay? Or should the question stick to what they were stopped for? I have a question. I didn't see in the policy what the response should be if somebody asks why they were stopped. Yeah.
So what we're supposed to handle, as a matter of fact, when policy is provided, stop you and all that's how it's supposed to work. Now, does it always work that way? No. That's why we want to ask good policy. To get guidance. An officer does, at least in this city, if they don't tell you what it's about, you should ask. What? You should be seeing it anyway.
Their thoughts. Well, if pulling back from the stops, like, there's so much happening across the country around like movements, either be in partnership with police or to reform police or to figure out how to improve law enforcement. So when you think about accountability, what does accountability look like for officers or peace officers who may not enforce the policy? Like, if all this goes well, everything passes, and should not stop people, or those who don't follow the policy, what would accountability look like? Like, how would you want to hold officers accountable who don't follow the policy? For example, Chief Scott just told us, if we were pulled over, we're supposed to be identified, we're supposed to be told why we were pulled over. Well, if that doesn't happen, how should that officer be held accountable? Jail time. comes with a fix-it ticket, where like if something was broken on the vehicle, pulled over, your light is out, get it fixed, sign, you go down, you pay like a nominal fee, all the processing fees. So what y'all are suggesting on the flip side, if there's a misstep in what in like the policy or something is not followed according to the policy, there are layers. So anywhere from step 1, perhaps the officer is fined, maybe a suspension or some sort of sanction, and then the ultimate, like the ultimate consequence, which will be imprisonment, jail time.
But I'm gonna rotate these in. Okay.
Thank you.
So, actually, what you all described is very close to what happened. So, the only difference, so let me explain what the rest of the commission has laid out. There's, we call it a discipline guide. So, for these types of infractions, unless the officers violate the law, that's a whole other process. But the commission has put out an updated guide, and like you said, depending on how bad the violation of policy is. It can start with reprimand, which is basically a warning saying you committed a violation of public policy. We're just going to warn you up to termination. And depending on how serious it is, something really you use excessive force. You can end up with jail time and jail time can be assessed both to the district attorney's office or the federal government, the U.S. Department of Justice, or the state. If an officer violated law, traffic stops can be a violation of law. If it's constitutional, I have no reason to stop you. And you can go on. If it be a violation of law, you go to jail. And definitely have to be done. But it feels like a minor say, I was supposed to tell you my name and start with a lower level. They can even start with a non-disciplinary called that line. In the policy too, and this time you get a break, you do it again, and it goes up to the second offense, and it's the third offense, and it's the higher fourth offense, you make it 5. So that's the way that the commission set the policy. So it's all progressive, like you keep doing the same thing, eventually it will work out. But there's a couple chances that depends on the data. So what you all decide is really kind of what the commission has already approved. If it's illegal, so is it. Some exceptions to that, like some minor things. Yeah, when it comes to the criminal system, it would. So we all have the same constitutional rights. So officers, they get rid of the rights. We have the same right that we all have to refuse to incriminate themselves. So it's all the same. Administrative rights are different. Because nobody, you're not guaranteed a job. My first job, just like, I would retire tomorrow. And then the criminal piece.
How many you were aware of the disciplinary guide that she's got? So that's great. I mean, not great that you weren't aware, but great in terms of area opportunities for improvement. So the next question is, like, what can we do to educate the public, educate our families, and community? One, that this policy is on the way to is going through this process, but also it says that officers should not stop people, but theoretically technically can stop people. So what can we do to make sure that are educated our friends, family, even on the disciplinary guide that we're discussing?
I would like to show you the change. I'm next to show you
Still relying on someone from their family
Why do people get tickets for having a broken license?
Yeah.
Great question.
That's weird. Like, get back in the car and feel like, and then you gotta, like, if they can't pay, that's what it is.
So the vehicle code, and this is, vehicle code is about this thing. And there, probably excess of 1,000, different things in the vehicle code. A lot of the equipment, well, I'm going to tell you kind of what the lawmakers would say. If you really want to research it, you can go really any code or law. If you go back and you can see what spirit behind the law. One of the things that, let's say, broke your life. When you change lanes, you're supposed to say, when you start driving lane or you get your driver's license, if you would take your driver's license, you change lanes and you don't stick it, they don't count that against you, right? And the reason is so the other drivers know what you're doing about this. And hopefully, for your age, to prevent unpredictable movement, have a finish, and it's not working, it may cause people not to know what they're going to do, change lanes, they try to so that's the reason what she said here is here's our
one of the questions we have is, should be an officer accident?
that's the spirit here. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So that's a really good question. So this doesn't change the law. And remember I said earlier that the commission can restrict and make tighter policy than what the law allows. So this will only be for you go to some other cities. I mean, I had it solved. So for some reason, like this code, this is We go outside the city, it's still, this city don't apply. This is only applied to. We're gonna have those information, but I want to make sure you all get your questions answered, so you guys can understand. You make up your own mind. 'Cause like I said, when I looked at it, I was trying to make somebody that want to be a really good question, because that's, intersection is basically large. But local jurisdictions, we have the right to do policies. We can't change it.
Thank you, Sedona.
Policy gets,
So, but that's a big one. Is that we can't change the law, the commission can change the law, they can say, yes, we're either gonna de-emphasize this, or we don't want to do it under these conditions. They do that all the time. You go to another city, it's one apply.
Any questions about the line here that says police officers will still be able to stop people for any traffic infraction, misdemeanor, or felony not listed above. So we want to make sure that if anything, I don't know what that would mean, but this list is not exhaustive. It could probably be a mile long. We just want to make sure, or even like related to walking or biking. Yes. I mean, enforcement is a different thing, but technically it's, it can be cited for jaywalking. Yes.
So I'm glad that was kind of anyone else have a comment?
Well, okay. And then well, my last question is any thoughts on how large is the department?
We got
Okay,
about
right.
1,600 right now.
Okay, and so 1,600 officers, how would the department, how would they go about being trained on this? You guys have, what would y'all have thoughts on, like, what would training look like in order to get officers up to speed? Keeping in mind, there are some officers that have been working with the department for decades, and so that started a couple months ago.
Not display registration, not expired registration. These things can be unvalid license plates, tail lights, brake lights, hanging something on your property, not your license plate, hurting or changing hands, unless it's likely to cause death, littering, U-turns, sitting in car, parking in front of you. These are common things that are this is not your license is different. And of course, if there is there's a court made on vehicle and all the crime that changes as well. How do you bail fix tickets? I don't know. Not going through. But you're right, there's no place like commissioner jumped in. It's kind of insecure.
It doesn't happen overnight. That's really, I mean, seriously, not in the workforce. For you to make that option.
Any general questions? Police and or comments? I think it's important to know, like, the civil rights movement was started by 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Like, a lot of folks think like all these adults, but it was started by black teenagers. That's what CP is, the Sleep Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SCLC, all the black legislative organizations were started by teenagers who organized, right? And so that's why y'all's voice is so important in what Chief Scott said, like, you're making impressive points because, like, really y'all have the agency and power to make things move. And so just take this conversation. Yes, I heard you on social media too, and word of mouth. So as you talk to your friends, or if your friends are telling you, stop at this cop because whatever, you know, I was walking across the street or I was riding my bike on the sidewalk. It's like, oh well, I was in conversation with the chief about this policy that they're considering, and so, you know, plug in. You know, we want to hear your thoughts, your opinions. There's this QR code for this survey. If y'all wouldn't mind, if you have your phone on you, you can take that. But we want to hear from more friends, family members who should be involved in this process. Because once you're old enough and once you get your licenses and you start driving, at least you know if this is passed, you'll be able to reference all this and be informed about what is and is not supposed to happen during a traffic stop.
And as this progresses, we have some plus out, and there are some discussions we have, so it's not finalized yet.
Going to ask everyone to start to wrap up your session, your groups. We'll start to close out a little bit. So I'll give you an extra 5 minutes to like wrap up.
There are instances where people have city goals because they don't want to be sued for whatever reason, you know, whether they're a celebrity or, you know, whether they're involved in other activities. And so where's the compromise between not only safety for officers in public, but also safety for the civilians operating the vehicles?
With this policy,
I think another thing that's interesting and that I've experienced, not me personally, but know people who have experienced is like stopping no vehicles, even after folks have done all the rehabilitation, changed their life, or stopping vehicles because they know that they like literally pull somebody over and walk up to them actually, I think I see that in the text. Officers know community.
Yeah, and that's great.
Reprimanded or admonished.
So how do you think typical work? You gotta know about it, you know, thousands of stops, unless somebody complains about it, that's usually when I talk to somebody, say, what stop? And then they call it complaint to our department, separate department, but police accountability is a separate department. Sometimes people don't report it. And that's legit. Sometimes nothing does.
While we were talking, I'm trying to put some of the articles up that I've
Guaranteed nothing.
what what we're
Would you know when to report something, if something happened and you wanted to make them file a complaint, would you know where? Right. So part of it is like not knowing where to report is the Department of Police Accountability. It's a whole separate department.
So as we prepare to close out and kind of wind down, I wanted to see if each table or group, or if there was one question or comment or concern or something that the table may want to elevate to share out as we get ready to close out. I know I heard an interesting conversation with Mr. Jones about why people might get arrested or stopped, but I don't think that we will share that one out beyond your group. If someone wants to know, you can ask him directly. But if there was any question, concern, anything that was discussed at the table that maybe folks would want to elevate. Anjanette. Yeah, and then I'll repeat it for the folks who are listening on Zoom.
So we just have a question. What's the step to the community testing and knowing that this will stop?
Yeah. So the question for the folks online, the question is, what is the way to build trust with community to believe that this new DGO, this new departmental general order is going to actually stop biased traffic stops or the pretext stops? And so I don't know, Chief or Commissioners, if there's an actual answer for how you build trust to actually get to believing that this is going to make the difference. Well, you can come up because I want to make sure the folks online can.
So I don't have a perfect answer, but I can tell you what the steps are to build trust. And first of all, these types of discussions are step one, really understanding each other and hearing each other. And I'm so happy that you all have come to participate in this discussion. So that's step one. Step two is we got to get a policy pushed forward. And like at our table, I don't know what the end result is going to look like, but we have to put the issues on the table. We have to be honest about everything, including how we got here, the past and how we got here. and be open and acknowledge that some things need to change. And I think all of us should have that acknowledgement. The third thing is, once this policy gets going, and our table talked about accountability and what that looks like, you know, if people aren't following the policy, there has to be accountability. And I think we are in a better position now than we've ever have been with getting to a place of accountability, because we do have the cameras on. So a lot of things that in the past was the officer's word against the member of the public's word, now you get to see what's happening. And so decisions can be made in terms of whether policy was followed or not. That goes a long way. All these steps have to be done consistently and fairly. And still, there's some people still may not have that trust, but if those things are done, we're going to be in a much better place. And it's going to take some time, because there are a lot of fractures in the community in terms of trust for well-documented reasons. It's not a perfect answer, but those are the steps, and I think if we do that, we have a good chance of getting there. Oh, that's your phone. I don't know about
Like, okay, see, okay, I'm gonna have to report you to the police. Another table, anyone else want to share? DeAnthony, I see you are, do you want to? I'm going to share what you told me. Oh, no.
So we had a very great conversation. Talking about a feeling of de-escalation, right? Officers and how they approach the vehicle, how they respond to someone whose nerves probably running, somebody who's probably...
Right, so just for the folks online, he's talking about de-escalation and nerves and anxiety and things running high.
We also talked about this idea of reasonable suspicion, and kind of spelling out some examples, maybe making that part of the draft DGO a little more spelled out, because what's reasonable to the officer is based off of their own preference and their own discretion. So, you know,
So there was a request to maybe define reasonable suspicion and give more examples of what that might look like as a part of the DGO, the Departmental General Order, so folks have an understanding of those other things that may not be as spelled out.
and of course, language barriers. How do we make sure that folks who maybe have language barriers, understand rights, understand what's going on, so then they may not come off as threatening to the officer who's just really a barrier.
So, and the last point was around language barriers. Oh, he's got one more, sorry.
And this is around educating and informing.
Oop.
This is around educating and informing members of the public. As we all know, this DGO hasn't been touched in almost 30 years. So how do we let folks know that there will be changes? How do we let folks know what those changes are when they are final? And how do we do that using or working with, not using, but working with community-based organizations, community leaders, technology, media, ad campaigns, everything.
Thank you, DeAnthony. Some really good points there. I see some snapping going on. Any other groups? Do you want over there? Stephanie, Athena, Jessica? No? No pressure.
We were just talking about like programs that could, well,
I get the mic. Shared, I think, officer said that it was Chief Scott's idea, but a program for vouchers for when there's like registration that's expired, like instead of like the smog, maybe sometimes the registration has been expired because they have to go through the smog and they don't have the funds to be able to do that. So is there a program, and then how do you, within that program, how do we make sure that it's the people that actually need it and not people taking advantage of it?
Really good point.
And
I think
accountability.
yeah, and if you create something like that, does it get added to the DGO to say, you know, you're allocating or you're working to get resources allocated to support folks who may not be able to pay fix-it tickets or to get their registration or get the front plates or know where to even do some of that. So thank you. Athena.
And I think we wanted to add on back to the accountability part is we run the policy and all of that, but where is the accountability in terms of what happens once you notify and recognize that someone has this bias? Where does that accountability start and end with that particular individual who's committing these pretextual stops that are biased in nature?
Yeah, accountability has come up quite a bit, and I don't know if that can be spelled out in the DGO, but, or if it can just live somewhere else so folks can get to it. Chief? Oh, do you want it, Athena?
That young lady at our table really kind of drilled down on that one, so. And they had some really, really good questions, but one of the things that we talked about at this table is what the commission has already set forth in terms of accountability. A couple of years ago, the commission revised a discipline matrix, which is a range of penalties if an officer has violated policy, and that goes from the lowest level of discipline is a reprimand, and a reprimand is basically a written warning, and then it goes up all the way to termination. So depending on the offense and the nature of the offense, I mean, this is all public if you all want to see it. It'll say, general, type of violation, and then what the range is on that. The reason that the commission did this, for those of you that are wondering, is so that the discipline, number one, is fair, based on the violations that were committed, and that there's some level of consistency. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but some level of consistency in officers who have similar misconduct are getting treated similarly. Now, every case is different, I mind you, but that discipline matrix is one of the practices that can really get us to a more consistent level of discipline when we have these violations. So if you have an interest, it's online. If you look at the commission's website, or if you do a search on SFPD policy, it's online under our policies, and but it's there, and for that to change, the commission would have to change the discipline matrix. But it was a really good question, and actually, the three young ladies at our table, before they even knew that existed, kind of out of what they felt was fair, kind of talked about some of the principles in that matrix. So if it's a low level of a violation, then the officer is not going to get terminated, but something needs to be done to hold the officer accountable. If it's an egregious violation, then that would merit a higher suspension or a higher penalty. So that's already in place, and again, that's kind of what accountability looks like in the SFPD.
Thanks, Chief. I just wanted to check before we close out. I know we had some people online, so I don't know if there was any feedback or a question or a comment from folks that were joining us online to share out.
Thank you. The look on my face is just trying to juggle a few things in my head. The comments were we had a very balanced discussion online. People recognizing that there is the need to continue to make sure our police officers are given the tools they have to conduct their work. That sometimes some of the issues that were mentioned here might actually be indicative of vehicles causing troubles. There was a particular citation of some of the vehicles involved with may just say some of the crimes in the city, and recognizing that the plates were a dead giveaway. And at the same time, we're hearing about people who were concerned. At one time, a gentleman was in a vehicle, they'd just gotten out, they were on parole. The driver, the car did something stupid and they get pulled over, but the guys in the back were terrified for their lives, right? Not that they felt threatened, but parole is a scary place to be, and I'm sure you understood this. They felt that that person's mistake was leading them to a position that could have affected their freedom. There were a lot of sides. We've captured this well here. I think that there's a very strong feeling across people here that this is a good thing to be discussed, but I would say that it wasn't clear across our discussions what the best direction was, as people really wanted to be sure that they weren't creating an untenable or detrimental policy here in the city.
Thank you, John. I know you were on the spot. Thank you for that responsiveness. I would just say give yourselves, all of you, a hand for coming out on one of the hottest days of the year in San Francisco and engaging in this conversation and participating. Again, please help share the survey and help collect information and feedback. And we'll have another convening in, did I skip a table? Yeah, yes.
Well, Chief Scott shared a lot about what we talked about. I think it's important to invite the multiple generations that we have represented. And since they didn't want to share, I will share. So one of the questions that came up was, will this, for some of the members at our table who are not eligible to drive yet, will this impact or change the driving test? The answer was no. However, I think it's important to note that this policy is specific to San Francisco, so we were able to discuss and highlight that when we leave this jurisdiction, is that right? Jurisdiction, that it may not be the same. So be mindful of that.
Yeah,
San
I think
Francisco special.
Yeah, I think that education policy for a lot of people, especially for our young people, is going to be really important to understand. You know, you might leave San Francisco and be stopped and have different ramifications, so just make sure folks are clear on that. As we close out, I just want to yield the floor to Commissioner Benedicto, who will give, I'm sorry you all, like every time I get up and say things like this, I have like flashbacks from being in church, and I feel like I'm supposed to say he's going to give the benediction, but I know, and now he's Benedicto on top of it, so it's further like complicating things in my mind, but I just want to give, yield the space for him to give the closing remarks and close us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Director Davis, and thank you again to all the volunteers and staff from the Human Rights Commission for helping with this process. I just want to reiterate what Director Davis said, to thank all of you for coming. There were a lot of questions about how we can restore some of that trust and repair those frayed connections in police and community, and events like this are a big part of that. I also want to reiterate, as Commissioner Carter Oberstone did, as this is one piece of a much larger process. For those of you that are here, if you have friends or family that you think would be interested in weighing in on this policy, they can complete the survey and submit it. If you go to the San Francisco Police Commission website, there's a section where they can just email us directly if they think the survey, if they want to share more opinions than just the survey questions. We review all of those comments on this policy. There's going to be another one of these large convenings on September 20th at the Bayview Opera House. And there are also sort of smaller discussions happening. If you are involved with a community organization and want, someone from the commission or the department to talk about this policy, like, let us know. I've said this at multiple community meetings. I will go where there are any people who want to hear about this policy, because I think it's so important that we get the community feedback and try to craft the best policy we can for the department, and do that in collaboration with community, because too often it's the commission and lawyers and command staff, and we really want to have a policy that is inclusive and transparent, and thank you all for being a part of that, and I hope you'll stay involved in that. So thank you all so much. Yes. Raise your hand if you're one of the HRC volunteers or on the HRC team to help us out today. Thank you all so much.
Everyone should take 4 to 5.
Just a quick housekeeping note too. As you all pack up and leave, we ask that you recycle any papers that you don't want, throw away any trash that you may have, and thanks again for being a part of this.